If you're an old school Yu-Gi-Oh game fan, you probably know about Forbidden Memories and Duelist of the Roses, and how they're loosely connected to each other through the presence of the Card Devils, Nightmare and his brother whose name I still can't pronounce. But what if I told you there's actually a third game in this series that many people don't realise even exists? Falsebound Kingdom for the Nintendo GameCube is another one of those games from that era of Yu-Gi-Oh where each game had their own weird and unique style of gameplay. And this one is especially strange, as to my knowledge it's the only Yu-Gi-Oh game to feature no card games or deck building elements whatsoever. Instead, it's an RPG inspired by a series known as Ogre Battle, combining real-time strategy with turn-based tactical combat for the battles. And pay no attention to the poor review scores, because this game is awesome. You command up to 8 marshals who are Yu-Gi-Oh characters you know and love, like Yugi, Kaiba, Joey, Mai, and Esperoba for some reason. Each marshal can control 3 classic Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that they can use to fight. You manage these marshals and move them around the map in order to take control of objectives, by defeating the enemy marshals defending those objectives. The premise is simple, and it's not exactly a difficult game by any means, but it's insanely charming and fun to play. I mean, just look at the aura on Obelisk the Tormentor. Bro looks like a secret boss in a Final Fantasy game. Holy shit, this is awesome! Wait, what the fuck? Wait, this is so cool! Holy... I haven't felt a moment as hype and as intimidating as this in a video game for a long time, and they were pulling this shit on the GameCube, for a title that went completely under the radar of so many Yu-Gi-Oh fans for years. The gameplay also has a surprising amount of depth you might not expect. Each marshal has a coloured orb which is their affinity, and choosing monsters for their team with an orb colour that is close to that colour will reward them with a stat buff. What that buff is also dependent on the marshal themselves. As you win battles, not only do your monsters level up, but your marshals do as well, and marshals like Yugi or Kaiba will provide a stronger all-around buff to all the stats as they level up, whereas a marshal like Joey will focus more on buffing the attack of his monsters. But that doesn't mean you have to always give them monsters that are the same colour as them, because the orbs actually slowly change colour over time the more you fight with them, as they grow closer to your marshal. Not only that, but leveling up your monsters also sometimes gives the monsters new abilities or special moves, and these are unique to each monster, so sometimes even monsters you think might be weak can actually turn out to be really powerful if you invest the time into leveling them. For example, Time Wizard can eventually paralyze enemies on his basic attack, or Swordsman from a Foreign Land gets a strong single target strike as a special move. Then there are certain combinations of monsters that also give you unique special moves, like having a team of all 3 Harpy Ladies gives you Triangle Ecstasy Spark as a massive AoE damage attack. Some monsters like Dark Magician Girl also get the ability to cast spells at a certain level, which need to be equipped like items in this game, and can perform a variety of effects from healing to giving you more actions in a battle. Speaking of which, each monster can only hold 3 items, so you have to make a decision on whether you want them to hold equips to passively buff their attack, potions for healing, spells, or special items like polymerization. In short, there's a lot that goes into building your teams especially, but you really can use whatever monsters you love the most and you won't get particularly punished for it. Finding new monsters to add to your roster is the hard part though. Some you acquire just through playing the game normally from the story or side objectives you can take, but others need to be encountered and defeated in the field. And the game doesn't give you any kind of guidance on where to find them, and they're invisible on the map. So you just have to wander around aimlessly for a while each mission and pray you run into them. Sometimes even knowing where the roaming monster is isn't good enough and you just don't encounter them. Looking at you, moisture creature. Of course, you also can't simply spend all your time looking around the map, because there are enemies you need to defend yourself from and a time limit. Although that very rarely poses much of a threat outside of a select few missions. While we're here, let's talk about the combat in this game. Each monster has a certain number of action points or AP, shown by the number of stars they have next to their HP bar. And this is based on the monster themselves and their level, some items they can hold, and also the marshal you're using and their level impacted as well. Each turn you spend your AP to either attack, defend, or use an item. Each action usually uses 1 action point, with the exception of special moves which use 2 in most cases, or the wait command which essentially skips your turn without using a point, which can be useful in some scenarios. Battle continues until one team is wiped out or everybody has run out of AP, with the winner being determined by a kind of arbitrary point system, because yes, killing the enemy team does typically win you a lot of points unsurprisingly. And so long as your units don't die, the only downside if you lose is that you don't gain much XP and you get stunned in the overworld very briefly. The stakes are rather low in this game, to be honest, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. In fact, with how amazing the 3D models of the monsters look and how they all have their own unique attack animations, sometimes it just feels really cool to simply watch the battles unfold, in a way that's sort of reminiscent to me of the Pokemon Stadium games. Plus, there's something very satisfying about making a team composition that works really well together, and you just start steamrolling all of the battles. I would certainly say the highlight of this game is in the combat and optimizing your teams. By contrast, the RTS element to this game is a really interesting idea and concept, but does kind of fall short in a few areas. I think a Yu-Gi-Oh game where you command monsters like warriors in battle like it's Age of Empires is a brilliant idea, but this game really only scratches the surface on the potential of that idea, because here its only real use is for deciding which of your marshals will tackle which objectives, and moving them away from fights if they're low HP. Unless you're searching for secret roaming monsters, there's not really any reason to send out any scouting units, because the whole map and all the objectives are visible from the start, so it's not like there's any fog of war they need to sift through or anything, which I think would make things a lot more exciting if you didn't know where the enemy were and whether or not there were units coming to attack your base. Also, maps are typically quite small without too many objectives, so it's very rare you ever actually need to use all 8 marshals in a battle. And I think it would have been interesting if there were some bigger maps with more objectives to manage, and a third team that was a neutral party that attacks both other teams indiscriminately. Or perhaps some sort of side quests to complete, because it really does feel dull sometimes watching your army simply march in a line towards the enemy base, waiting for them to get there so you can battle and complete the mission. Which is another problem I have with this game, is that all the units move so goddamn slowly on the overworld, it's honestly painful sometimes that you can't speed it up. But yeah, I love the idea, I just wish they did more with it. What I do love about the RTS segments of this game though is the ability to build equipment in the towns you take over, giving you the ability to provide yourself some useful tools where needed so long as you have the money for it, like making anti-ground or anti-air cannons to stop incoming enemies, building a shop where you can buy healing items and equips, or simply building a wall to help you defend the city by giving you a buff in defensive battles. Again, I do think the town management element is only very simple, but it is a very fun way to add some options to give yourself a strategic advantage throughout the game. If you purchase the trader in a town, sometimes very rarely they can have special items like Call of the Haunted or Cocoon of Evolution as a couple examples. These can evolve certain monsters into stronger forms permanently, as opposed to polymerization where fusion monsters are only present for the one battle where the item was used, which kinda sucks. However, for this reason, these items are extremely expensive, so you need to make sure to be smart about how much money you're spending on other equipment and items, and make sure a marshal with the discount ability is there to help decrease the costs. Because oh yeah, some marshals have special abilities like decreasing the costs of the buildings themselves, or just simply being allowed to summon God if you're Yugi or Kaiba. So it's important to remember these if you wish to make the most out of the strategic RPG elements of the game. Or you could just cheat and input the Konami code before every battle to get a ton of extra money, that's fine too I guess. The last thing I want to talk about is the story of this game. It follows Yugi and the gang as they are invited to try out some new VR duel technology after the events of Battle City. And you would think that after their second time getting trapped in a virtual reality world, they would be a little bit more apprehensive about jumping into one of these things. Especially Kaiba, as he specifically calls out the fact that he recognizes the workers as employees he's fired before and doesn't think any of them might possibly hold a grudge. But nope, they all dive in without hesitation because somebody promised them duel monsters. Lo and behold, once again they're trapped in a video game. The game, named simply Kingdom, is a medieval world controlled by an oppressive empire led by Emperor Heishin, and follows the story and battles of a rebellion rising up against them. You can choose to follow either Yugi or Kaiba's story, with Joey being a secret unlockable third campaign if you finish both the others first. Choosing Yugi sees you taking control of the rebellion, while Kaiba is thrust into the role of one of the leaders of the empire, and Joey leads his own small group of resistance fighters known as the Black Dragon Squad, with his campaign working as a sort of prequel to the events of the other two campaigns. Whichever you choose, the story is mostly a means to an end, where each leader spends most of their campaigns moving between locations in the fictional world, gathering allies and fighting their opposing faction. With the story mostly playing out the same way, eventually the rebellion is successful in defeating Heishin and he's deleted from the game by the creator Scott Irvine, who intervenes to impede the gang's progress because he can't let them beat the game yet, as he needs their souls to stay trapped so that he can use them to revive Nightmare, and use them to help him gain control of the Egyptian god cards. So he brainwashes Yugi's friends and kidnaps Mokuba, with the main difference in the campaigns being who is the one to chase down Scott and challenge him, and stop Nightmare before he can be fully revived. The story isn't exactly anything too fancy or complicated, but it's a fun way to bring back Nightmare one last time, before Konami forgot how to make creative single-player experiences for Yu-Gi-Oh games. It serves its purpose by giving Yugi and Kaiba an excuse to fight each other again, just don't expect the kind of intricate and engaging RPG story that you might expect from something like Dragon Quest or Persona. And that pretty much sums up everything you need to know about the forgotten gem that is Yu-Gi-Oh! The Falsebound Kingdom. Just last year I'd never even heard of this game before, and now I've beaten the whole thing and I adore it, and I'm already planning some future challenge runs for it. As you can see, it has a ton of really cool ideas, and a lot more depth to its RPG and RTS systems than you'd think, even if the game is never that difficult, so the true extent of it is never required to beat it. It's not exactly a masterpiece of a game by any means, far from it actually, and if you're not nostalgic for this era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And its weird experimental period of games, I'd even hesitate to recommend it to you, but I can't help but feel drawn in by its unique charm. And despite all of the criticisms I have for this game, I still found myself loving it dearly, and I don't think it takes away that much from how impressive and enjoyable the game really is, especially as a fan of the early days of the series. Plus, I think it's fascinating how they managed to make a whole Yu-Gi-Oh game that's completely disconnected from card games. I've also been repeatedly recommended a mod for the game called the Kaizo mod, which apparently makes quite a few changes and improvements to the game that will supposedly fix some of these issues, as well as adding a bunch of other new stuff as well, which certainly has me excited, and I'll definitely need to try it out on stream at some point. But honestly, I wish we didn't have to be so reliant on modders to keep these old school style of Yu-Gi-Oh games alive. Like, please Konami, could we go back to getting fun and unique games like this again? Because I had an absolute blast playing this, and I wish I could see what they would be capable of if they made a game like this again, with more modern cards, better graphics, and more intricate gameplay systems. But anyways, that about does it for this video. I'm honestly not entirely sure what the purpose of this video was meant to be. I suppose you could call it a review? But really, I think I just wanted an excuse to gush about how cool I think this game is, and how much I enjoyed playing through it recently. Regardless, if you're still here, allow me to pay my YouTube tax by telling you to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you want to see more of this game, check out my live streams where I played through all 3 campaigns. In any case, hopefully I'll see y'all in the next one.